Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to the PropsClear podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Angeline. We're talking all about drones and about improving public perception surrounding the unmanned aviation industry. These episodes are for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, so none of this constitutes legal advice. Fasten your seatbelts and let's get started. Today's guest is Ryan Walsh. He is CEO and founder of Valqari. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me and talking with me about the Valkyrie message. What is your product and what are you hoping to accomplish by putting it out into the world?
Thank you so much for having me, Jillian. It's been a pleasure and honor to be on your show. Um, we're building what started as drone delivery infrastructure, but has really expanded into a much wider set, a fully point-to-point autonomous drone delivery platform that can be used for a number of other interesting applications, such as first responder support and wildfire response. And so, we're finding our system to be a pretty agnostic and universal drone platform for a number of use cases.
Now, the one thing we've been talking about off camera is this giant mailbox. It's about 7 feet tall. It's got multiple spots, about six, where people can pick up packages or, B2B can pick up packages. And then what the drone does is it'll drop off that package on the top of that mailbox, and then a robot inside will put it in the appropriate spot. Tell me how this works and how you came to come up with this idea.
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's really the cornerstone that our system's built on. So we started with the infrastructure, realistically focusing on single family home mailboxes about 6, 7 years ago, and slowly shifted towards larger commercial lockers. And exactly that, we treat it very much like a traditional parcel locker to really avoid changing as much of the customer habits as possible and make it no different than any current interaction you have with a parcel locker or mailbox. So our 7.5 foot tall drone port serves as both the sending and receiving station for drone deliveries. A customer would make an order, the employee would go and place it into one of the open available lockers on the drone port. It would get brought into an elevator and brought up to the drone, where it would then get loaded onto the drone while the drone's doing an airspace check over the UTM. Once it gets approval, it then flies autonomously with pilot oversight to the receiving point, where it goes through an authentication, lands, drops the package off, customer gets notified and picks it up.
And how many do you have of these prototypes?
So we have just over 30 deployed from the South Pacific all the way to Northern Europe right now. We're obviously looking to keep expanding that footprint and have a bunch of really exciting new deployments coming up. But yeah, we've seen a lot of different use cases already.
What's the feedback like from people when you first tell them about something like this? I think it's rather exciting personally.
I do too. It's evolved over the years. I've been doing this a long time, right? I've been at this since 2013, and I remember 2016, 2017. People thought this was crazy. They said 50 years out. And then slowly but surely, I think COVID and people being locked in really forced them to reanalyze how they kind of go about their day to day. And a lot of people realized if a drone was bringing me my items right now, this would help a lot. And so that probably sped things up quite a bit. But we're at a point now where people see this. It's on the horizon. If you live in spots in Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, you probably have drone delivery near you. So we're already seeing it in the
Mhm.
southern states and making its way north. So I don't think this is as crazy or sci-fi anymore. I think we're really kind of grounding this in reality, no pun intended.
Oh, I love that. That's a great line. One of my favorite taglines, probably in the whole drone industry, I think is yours: "Perfecting the last inch of the last mile." Tell me what the origins of that tagline are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So we were looking at, what problem we were solving, and we realized that the last mile is really a major factor for modern living that we kind of don't realize is
Mhm.
grinding away as hard as it is day to day. We saw some of that come to a bit of a halt during COVID and what that means for society. And so, how do we
Mhm.
amplify that? How do we provide a bit more support and add another layer, because we can't keep extending that further. And so we started looking at how this is going to interact with the customer while everybody else was focusing really on the drone side. Um, that led us to the landing stations,
Mhm.
and we started filing all the patents on those. Um, but it was really kind of shifting to that customer focus that led us to the last mile, because that's really when you think at scale who's going to be using these drones. What I also found very fascinating was over half of the costs of shipping anything really in the Western world from China, over 53% of those costs are coming from your last mile, right? And that's just the fulfillment center to your home or business, and it's, 2, 3, 4
Wow.
miles away. So you think about all of the pressures that go into building that, and it's failed delivery attempts,
Hmm.
last minute changes, theft, damage. All of those things are driving the cost up, and drones don't actually solve those problems. They make it more efficient. They give us a new way of delivering it, but they don't actually solve the last mile problems. And so that was kind of what led us from mailboxes to lockers into now just looking at the entire last mile being the critical focus.
There's been a lot of talks about the need to deconflict the airspace with things like drone delivery. A lot of these drone delivery, you know, processes are done at 100, 200 feet off the ground from what I've seen. Do you think there is some work that needs to be done with the FAA to help with regulations to get this approved so that, these package deliveries in the sky can happen, and not cause any, major incidents along the way?
Yeah, I think the FAA has been working with a number of great companies. There's a lot of great UTM companies in the business. Some that come to mind are Airspace Link and Air Matrix and One Sky, and we're partners with many of them. And I think that they're all working on very specific pieces of that because it is a rather complex just problem set. When you're dealing with kind of that
Mhm.
third dimension, you have, X, Y, and Z axis, you need to be very cognizant. You're also dealing with new environments, right? We've seen birds in the past can get a bit territorial. Obviously, if you're dealing with wind canyons and wind corridors in more dense urban areas, those are things that need to be taken into account. And so there isn't really a one size fits all solution. And I think as we get more data points and we get more
Mhm.
granularity in some of the weather forecasting and just those different things that are going to go into more safe and secure flights. I think a lot of those problems are almost to the end of being solved from a, you know, kind of sandbox point of view, but it's going to really matter when we get to
Mhm.
the real world and see thousands of drones flying past each other.
What is your biggest problem or issue that you are dealing with right now, if you're willing to
There's
share?
yeah, there's a very big ripple effect that cascades through the drone industry. It reverberates. You can almost count it.
Mhm.
And we've been going through a few of them. I would say we're probably going to be in the fourth one pretty soon. But you'll have these
Mhm.
spikes and lows, right? And it just kind of does it somewhat periodically and almost predictably. Um, but you'll have new
Mhm.
FAA announcements, right? People get excited, the regulations come out, there's a step in the right direction. We've never seen a step backwards. That's something I wanted to highlight is we've never seen anything saying nope,
Mhm.
drones are not happening anymore. So the kind of rebound effect from that where whiplash is, and then the VC money usually will slow down for a little bit, and then another big breakthrough comes with regulations or a big use case, and next thing you know they're back interested. But kind of not letting that cycle impact you is tough, because many drone companies in the industry are still reliant on funding of some sort, just to get through these regulations. And with them coming in the next 12, 14 months, it looks very exciting. It looks like we're right on the cusp of this happening, but it ends up flowing all the way through. So the drone companies don't have the money they need to really take on some cool projects, do some R&D, right? So that ends up flowing to subsystems like myself and some of our partners, that are just bolt-on features to their networks. So it flows through quite heavily in this industry.
How do you weather those storms?
We try to get horizontal. Any of the wrestlers out there, right? Somebody shoots for your legs, you sprawl. So we uh, we target a number of different jurisdictions and
I love
regular,
a sports analogy.
right? So we have units in the U.S., Canada, South Pacific, Europe, looking to expand that footprint. So we're not on one necessarily timeline or another for the FAA or EASA or whoever else.
Oh, that's good to know. Is there something you wish you'd known when you first started in the drone industry? What even got you interested in the drone industry?
It was 10 years ago, and my co-founder Alex and I, we were looking at a new challenge, and I don't know if we knew what we were getting ourselves into at the time, but it was fun, right? I love it. I think that if you can go to work every day and work on flying robots, that's like the coolest job. 5-year-old me would high five me right now. Um, it's it's
Absolutely.
it's fun to show up to work every day. It's fun to know that your technology, right? I mean, this was something I created out of my garage, right? I mean, this is changing the world and has the potential to really revolutionize society. And I hope close food deserts and increase access to care and, provide in-home support for more immobile patients and elderly patients. I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking with it was with you or one of your other colleagues about those food deserts. That's a huge part of trying to, you know, make that gap for people who can't access fresh fruits and vegetables smaller. That making that gap smaller with just a drone is an incredible use case for something like Valkyrie.
Yeah, if we can, have local community gardens. I mean, some of the worst food deserts aren't that far from us here in Chicago, right? And if we can have community gardens that can
Mhm.
then distribute that to the local community drop points, I mean, that right there. Now kids have more nutritious diets. They're able to focus in school better. They're more attuned and they're learning better, and that, I mean, it's a better outcome for everybody.
So a lot of what Valkyrie is doing is, a way to help people make their lives easier. And that's what I think a lot of the drone industry is doing to try and help people. There's drone industry work now for medical delivery. A lot of Zipline's doing a lot of that work in Africa. They've been doing that for years. And then you're talking about here in the US about those food deserts, about helping the elderly make sure that, they can have connections with people. They can send packages across the street from one place to another place. Have you heard any feedback from people about their thoughts on how it's going to help people,
Yeah, I mean,
just
everybody's
regular people?
Yeah, people are really excited. There's the convenience factor, and I can get my items from Amazon or the corner store a little bit quicker. But in my opinion, that's kind of the end goal, bit of an emergent property. But in reality, the problem is with food deserts, with elderly care, with inpatient care in home. Um, it's very expensive. I mean, that's one thing in the U.S. that you hear across the
Hmm.
board. Food and healthcare, it's rising at exponential rates, and wages aren't keeping track, right? And so, how do you balance this without sacrificing the quality of your food or the quality of your medical care? And those are two of the most important things that you have, right? And so, uh, if you look at some of the math, right, there's been a number of studies that came out. ARK Invest did one, Amazon did one, and the numbers across the board are pretty much 22 times cheaper. It'll be about 22 times cheaper on
Hmm.
average to do a drone delivery versus a car delivery of the same distance, amount, payload, whatever. And it's a lot greener. So, we have the clean energy factor going into it, which is already an important piece, but being able to lower that cost of care, if now all of a sudden to get that produce that is locally grown and easily sourced to you is now within your
Hmm.
budget for a family that's making a average American wage, right? How do you afford delivery? That's one of the
Hmm.
most expensive pieces. And so if we can get those food items, get that medical care, get those items that they ordered to their homes faster and cheaper, they can now spend more time with their family. They can spend more time doing things they need to do, and less time, just doing the busyness of living.
Oh, amen. I like that. What are you looking forward to in the drone industry in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see it going? I know a lot of people talked about advanced air mobility. There's a push to have electric air taxis in Paris for 2024 Olympics. So I know that that's on the horizon. So the drone industry seems to be expanding to not just carrying packages like fruits, vegetables, like medical supplies, like we've been talking about, but people too. Do you think, or what are you hoping to really see in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I think that would be great, right? You can order an air taxi and take it to the airport. You don't have to worry about traffic. You're there in half the time. You're there for less than an Uber, right? I mean, it's kind of the dream is that everybody is able to access these improved means of transportation and logistics for a much more cost effective amount, right? And um, we have to replace these people that are supposed to be doing this with jobs. The jobs are going vacant. People can't find the help. So, I mean, what choice do we have? We do have to start automating a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've automated so much else in our lives. I mean, it only makes sense, right? Air taxis to me aren't that much of a stretch. I mean, we've had helicopters for a long time. This is just electrifying them. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that much of a technological jump, in my opinion. We already have all the airframe work in place. I mean, in my opinion, the extra years that have taken for AAM seem overly complicated, considering we already have all the framework laid out for helicopter travel. So I think some of it's just social acceptance, some of it's politics, some of it's financial, but there's a lot of factors going into it. I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to improve people's lives. I mean, how much did our cities improve from horse to automobile, right? I mean, people used to wade up to their knees in horse manure, right? I mean, I think things have
Mm-hmm.
improved with automobiles. I think air travel and drones are going to be the next step in that.
You talk about jobs. A lot of people are concerned. People talk about with this with AI, artificial intelligence these days, that they're going to be taking away people's jobs. But then I talk with people about the drone industry, and the goal is that this will allow people to get skilled professions
Yes,
if they enter into the drone industry. So it's not about getting rid of jobs. It's about just changing the type of job that someone may have, and they'll be able to have that technical background in order to help make, whether it be taking apart a drone and fixing a part, whether it be helping to make sure those electric air taxis fly on the back end. There's a lot of room for new jobs with this industry.
I agree. We're seeing huge demand for jobs in trucking and last mile and all these things. We can't find these people anymore, right? It's just they're becoming more and more difficult for companies to source. And so I don't think there's this we need jobs, right? We're at record low unemployment. Everybody, is working to maximum effect at this point. It seems from the job data, although
Mhm.
take that for what you will. But there's a huge opportunity here, and I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time in our lifetimes that this has been possible. Um,
Yeah.
by really diving into the drone industry, it's not necessarily just replacing that one driver, right? There is entire organizations worth of people that are really
Mhm.
opening up new positions. You need somebody building those drones, testing those drones, certifying those drones, the photographers that are using them. You need the people that are working the vertiports and maintaining our drone ports. You need the engineers that are designing all the new
Mhm.
features. You need all the civil engineers to make sure they're working with the civil zoning and the electric grid and all of the different things. The
Mhm.
architects, I mean, that are building these systems into current architecture, right? Downtown Chicago, 100+ year old buildings. What are you going to do there, right? You have to figure out a way to make that work.
Mhm.
And so there are so many opportunities. I think that people sometimes almost drown in that first layer of like, there's going to be pilot jobs and technician jobs, but there are so many more. I mean, even just some of the insurance and legal frameworks, Dan Sloat and I were just teaching a class in Finland on that the other week. because there's just so many
Mm.
things that need to be sorted from these brilliant minds out there. So, yeah, I think it's more opportunity for employment than what it will replace.
You were talking about how you really love to go to work every day. People say that if you love what you do, it really doesn't feel like a job. Is that true for you?
Yes and no. I mean, it's I love what I do. I love Valqari. I love the team I work with, but startup world is startup world, and it's a fight sometimes. It's not always rainbows and sunshine, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I'd do it all over again if I had the choice.
If you had advice for someone who's listening who doesn't know anything about the drone industry but hears these podcast episodes, gets excited and go, "Where can I start? What do I even do?" What do you tell them?
Learn everything you can. There's so much information out there. Talk to as many people as you can. There's so many people in this industry with a wealth of knowledge that are willing to help. Um, and don't be afraid to fail. That's the one thing I see in this industry that I think kind of needs to be pushed through a little bit, right? There's that grind between the startup
Mm.
world and established aviation, and startup world wants to move fast and break things, and aviation, those are the antithesis of everything they're about. And so oftentimes you'll see companies almost R&D to death, and not just get out there, and sometimes you got to crash it,
Mm.
right? Go into a safe area, obviously follow all FAA requirements, and throw up a net, whatever you got to
Mm.
do to make sure it's safe. But get out there and test, and make sure that your systems are doing what you need to do, and don't kind of be afraid of all the setbacks you're going to have along the way. I mean, I bet you we've had hundreds and hundreds of flights that didn't go as planned, but we learned something from them. We changed something, and we've had a better system because of that bad flight. So I would really push people to not be afraid of that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing where Valkyrie lands in even more places across here in the US and around the world. If you have topics or suggestions for future episodes, email me, angelswings.jillian@gmail.com. That's ANGELSWINGS.JILLIAN@gmail.com. I'll see you later.